If Penn State can land commitments from these final few players, they'll have a top 10 class for the 2025 cycle.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Now, easier said than done, but if Penn State can get these final few remaining players to commit, their work's practically finished for the class of 2025. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this is summer and FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone each and every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Be a part of the discussion down in the comments section. We're talking about the remaining priority players that Penn State, they get a commitment from them. They boost this class of 2025 significantly and can keep them in the top 10. We'll talk about some other targets that have fallen to the wayside. And then the most recent commits, Jeff Exinor and Jayden Woods, to wrap things up. So how can Penn State secure a top 10 class? Easier said than done, but let's look at the next potential commitments here. And I want to begin with the wide receivers because Jeff Exinor comes off the board. He commits to Penn State, but the Nittany Lions could secure 5 wide receivers in this class of 2025 if everything goes well. Taz Williams has to be that next priority player. In my opinion, and why I'm starting with Taz Williams is because I like him out of all the other receiving targets that have been in this cycle that have been obviously, Quincy Porter in them. They're on a different level. But Taz Williams, what I've seen recently at some of these camps, he is a dude. He's a baller. And it looks like, the class of 2025 has really put in some extra efforts here to see if they can convince Taz Williams, and maybe it has worked. It might pay off here in the end because Taz seemed like a strong lean to Michigan. Talked to some Michigan sources and said, yeah, Taz Williams seems like he'll end up here, but he's going to go through his official visits over the summer. And then Penn State cut into that recruiting lead. So now, according to Happy Valley Insider, the Penn State rivals, Taz is leaning Penn State. Not a guarantee, but this is a lean for Penn State. Southern Methodist, SMU, Texas A&M aren't giving up. He is from the Texas area, but Happy Valley Insider says that Penn State is the lean here now, not Michigan, even though all 4 schools are still in the mix. Strongly the Texas schools, but you get my point here. And Happy Valley Insider says specifically watch out for SMU if it's going to come down to this final recruitment. He's got a commitment date set for July 13th. That's just inside 2 weeks away. But Penn State is in the lead as we speak. Those other schools aren't going to give up. But Taz Williams is definitely going to boost and stabilize this class of 2025 if and when they land his commitment. Speaking of wide receivers, again, they could land a total of 5 here, right? You have Lyric Samuel, Jeff Exinor already in the class. You have Taz Williams now ready to commit in just a matter of less than 2 weeks. Lex Cyrus, Pennsylvania in-state commit, speedy slot receiver, and all the signs, all the experts in the recruiting world say Lex Cyrus is going to end up at Penn State. And I trust them. I do. South Carolina isn't giving up. And let's just put it that way. I'm not saying here, I'm not implying that South Carolina is going to end up getting a commitment from Lex Cyrus. They are just going to try to make this recruitment as interesting as possible all the way until the end. No commitment date set, but Cyrus, just as important to go along with this group. And you need to ideally secure 2 out of these 3. Matthew Alton is the last one I'm going to list. And depending on when you listen to this and watch this, this might be old news because he actually commits today. This episode's going up Monday, July 1st. And Matthew Alton is set to commit on this day. Super athletic, Probably one of the most underrated players in the class of 2025. Brian Smith, who's a frequent guest on the show, is our recruiting expert, brought out into our attention, okay, hey, this prospect is visiting Penn State, kind of flies under the radar. He's got a, up and down recruiting rating. Some people have him as a 3-star. Others have him as one of the best athletes overall in the country. Alton, probably another one. I mean, easily one of my favorite prospects in this recruiting cycle. Definitely one of the most underrated. And unless new information surfaces within this time that you listen to this in the morning and then he commits in the afternoon, really no one knows where he's going to commit other than Alton, friends, and family. 24/7 did put in a prediction for him that he's going to Virginia Tech. That was the Maryland editor that said that, hey, he's probably going to end up at VT. So maybe he had some conversations. Maryland was in his top list of schools, Virginia Tech as well, Penn State. I would say that it's down to Brent Pry and the Hokies and the Nittany Lions here. Alton has just been quiet. Brian Smith has said that. Other recruiting analysts have said that. It's just hard to get a read here. So we're all going to be surprised when his commitment finally drops here on Monday, July 1st in the afternoon. So those are the wide receivers that can really solidify this class and keep Penn State in the top 10. But if they miss out on these players, that's not going to happen. Randy Adarica is another one of those names. Seriously underrated player. You see a common theme here. Penn State has all these priority targets, and they're just underrated. It seems like it's down to USC and Penn State. That's an interesting one because he's a Florida native. We previewed his visit, talked about him as a potential prospect on the show with Brian Smith, given his ties to the state of Florida. You need someone on the interior, and if you're going to build the interior defensive line around anybody, Randy Adarica's a pretty good start here. And don't feel bad about Penn State, focusing entirely on defensive ends, because we'll talk about that more in the final segment. But the 2024 cycle saw a lot of interior defensive linemen commit to Penn State. It is pretty crowded at this point in time, given the players that are going to leave after this season. But it's why there's a focus on defensive end and not so much at defensive tackle. That is why 2024 saw a lot of the defensive tackles. 2025 is seeing more so defensive ends. But if you can get Randy Adarica to complement the movement that Deion Barnes has started here on the defensive line, that is what you want to do. Other priority spots here. Malachi Goodman is a name everybody is going to want to keep an eye on. It seems like in Penn State and Auburn, we're kind of, again, going back and forth. Alvin Henderson in Penn State. Henderson ends up going to Auburn here. But Goodman, being out of the state of New Jersey, he's being recruited by SEC schools. Penn State, at least, there's no indication, hey, he's a strong lean, one way or another, that it's kind of all equal at this point, and Penn State is right in the mix. But you want to get your fourth offensive line commitment right there in Malachi Goodman, who can play guard, tackle, very versatile. You also want to try to flip Zahir Mathis. So Penn State has 3 edge defenders committed. Deshaun Burnett is somebody that could potentially be a defensive end down the road. So you hypothetically have 4 defensive end commitments right now in this class of 2025. Zahir Mathis, one of the top Pennsylvania recruits, committed to Ohio State, scheduled a last-second official visit in Happy Valley. That's a good sign. I would probably err on the side that he's going to stay committed to Ohio State, but never say never. There is a chance that it could happen, unlikely, but it could happen where Mathis flips, returns home. Because like I said, defensive end, we got to talk about it more in the final segment. And then there's LeVar Arrington II. Keep an eye on that because defensive end was pretty quiet as far as recruiting went. And now linebacker saw DJ McClary flip away. Deshaun Burnett and Alex Tatch are still committed, but what if Burnett moves to defensive end, right? So then it's just Tatch all by himself. LeVar Arrington II can help rebound the losses that have been at the linebacker spot here in the class of 2025. Just now, let's provide some updates on Penn State targets that haven't exactly gone their way on the recruiting trail. We'll update you there. Jaden Blair, could he be a potential commitment? Rashad Johnson, where do things stand with him? Well, that's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop, but the playoffs wind down. We get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like we all want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want because all I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime that I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all of its customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. So there's something for everybody every day all summer long. And all you got to do is head over to fanduel.com/locked on and start making the most out of your summer. And if you take a look at FanDuel right now, you can bet on Major League Baseball. The slate's kind of small for a Monday. The Houston Astros are favorites against the Blue Jays with an 8.5 line for the total. The Mets and the Washington Nationals are actually minus 108 on the money line, pretty even, 8.5 total. And the Brewers and the Rockies, Milwaukee is a heavier favorite with the total set at 11.5 in Colorado. If you like those lines, all you got to do is head over to fanduel.com/locked on. That is fanduel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So we'll rattle them off here in the second segment. Jayden Blair, Rashad Johnson, Malik Washington, Andrew Olish, just names that Penn State fans, college football fans, especially when you look at recruiting, are very familiar with. Jayden Blair, I think, is one of my favorite prospects in this class of 2025. The safety, the versatility, right? He can play safety. He can play cornerback. He's 6'4.5", right? He has the ideal size that you would like in the secondary there. Notre Dame's going to be the most likely destination. Everything I've gathered, there's been predictions made for him across most of the recruiting sites here. Penn State had a chance. They had him for his final official visit, and it seems like it's still going to be the Fighting Irish. I do want to point this out. Remember, okay, yes, this is a loss because of Blair's potential, but Penn State has 5 defensive back commits. Terry Smith, Anthony Poindexter have done an incredible job in this cycle. I think Blair can be elite. A lot of other people would agree with me, especially those who are in the scouting industry. Blair has a lot of potential. Penn State did a nice job, right? You get Braswell Thomas, Antonio Branch, right? You get your safety commits. You have your 3 cornerback commits. But it's difficult to not sit back and think that it hurts missing out on a potential safety duo of Blair and Kanoa Winston, especially with Winston being first cousins with KJ Winston, who's going to be a first-round pick in the 2025 NFL draft. Winston and Blair was top of the line when it came to your safety prospects. And you do get quality players, high-end 4 stars in Branch and Thomas. But I have to admit, Penn State's original plan was to try to get Blair and Winston as its dynamic safety duo. Rashad Johnson was in that conversation as well. He's another safety target. Johnson seems to be a strong lean anywhere but Penn State. Never say never, but kind of the same case here. 5 defensive backs. It's already really crowded. You have your 2 safeties. It seems like Georgia is the destination here. So Johnson's a great prospect, but obviously not a need at this point in time. And then I'm eager to talk about the Malik Washington situation again. Matt Zollers, Malik Washington, what a conversation that was. If you look back in some old Locked On Nittany Lions episodes, preview, hey, which quarterback should Penn State want? And they never got either of them, right? I think how crazy recruiting can be from, oh, they're going to get Washington or Zollers, and they never did, right? Washington finally committed to Maryland at the end of June. He's already recruiting Jeff Exinor to flip, who's now recently committed to Penn State, right? Washington is a good quarterback prospect, very good quarterback prospect. Heck, if he wasn't, he wouldn't have been invited to the Elite 11, but they invited him and he actually performed very well. But if Penn State wanted him so badly, they would have found a way to make him a part of this class of 2025. And I think that's something that just kind of remains unsaid. Washington, as good as he projects to be, was what at the end of the day seems like he wasn't a take for Penn State. Washington visited tons of times on his own, but all on unofficial visits. Never took an official visit during June. Why is that? Penn State's clearly content with Beckham Kritza as its quarterback in the class of 2025. But take it a step further. If you were to take it didn't really come down to Kritza and Malik Washington. That's not what the debate is. It then became Malik Washington and your 2026 quarterback. That's really what this came down to. And Penn State preferred taking a top-tier quarterback in 2026 as opposed to doubling up in 2025. And I don't blame them. Troy Hune right now is a top 10 quarterback in the nation, will most likely get invited to the Elite 11 when his time arrives for that next recruiting cycle, right? That's a year away. Washington, not at the same level as that. Troy Hune, Diabell, the players that they were targeting in the class of 2026, now they have Hune in the fold. That puts Malik Washington on the side. I think Penn State had honest conversations. They liked Washington, but he was better off going somewhere else, and he decides to stay home. So best of luck to him as he commits to the Maryland Terrapins. Then there's Andrew Olish. We'll bring it back to Pennsylvania here to finish up segment number 2. Olish is headed to either Michigan or Alabama. He said it's down to those two schools. Hopefully Alabama's the winner here, because I still don't like that KJ Winston's first cousin Kanoa is committed to the Wolverines, but it is what it is, right? They beat Penn State on the recruiting trail for that one. But you also want to see a quality prospect leave Big Ten play, right? You don't want to face Andrew Olish against it in a Michigan uniform. You would rather him go to Alabama here so that he doesn't affect Penn State's competition. Hopefully Alabama is the winner there, because like I said, I don't want to see Penn State go up against a former top recruit, someone that was in the state of Pennsylvania, right? Dominate the state and everything. And he ends up playing against Penn State more often than not. They take him and drop him into the SEC. Predictions say that Olish is going to end up at Michigan. Never say never. He's very keen on both of those schools. So hopefully the Crimson Tide are able to pull off an upset in this case based on what recruiting experts think will happen here. You just hate to see another top Penn State prospect leave Pennsylvania and not commit to Penn State. Now, Penn State still has 6 commitments from the state, in-state, for this class of 2025, which is good, but it's not the same. To see Zollers, to see Olish potentially, to see Zahir Mathis stay committed to Ohio State potentially, right? Just these top targets looking elsewhere. And then legacies, Michael Carroll, Anthony Sacca, right? It is strange. I just think that's the new wave of recruiting. Brian Smith has said that too, that with the conference expansion, NIL, technology, you can just do more. And that's why you're seeing Penn State replace those losses with commits from California, Florida, Texas, Kansas, right? Now let's talk about one of those prospects that commits from out of the area, Jayden Woods, defensive end, edge recruit, along with Jeff Exiner, wide receiver, who just committed this past week. Their impact, their potential. We'll discuss that next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Wide receiver recruiting, defensive end recruiting is heating up, has heated up here in this process over the past week here. And we discussed those wide receiver potential commits at the top of the show. How about one that's in the fold now? Jeff Exiner. I like this one a lot. Penn State is getting a physical receiver above all else, because they've been recruiting a lot of speed. All these other wide receiver prospects have speed in common, but Jeff Exiner is your complete all-around wide receiver that has size to ideal size, 6'2", 220 pounds in high school. Okay, so he already has college-ready size, great catch and traffic ability. You watch the tape, he's just able to go up and get the football. He's able to box out cornerbacks and just bully them with his size. He's good at a little bit of everything overall. So like I said, that complete wide receiver. Now, he's not the fastest one, but a solid route runner and plays very good football. 4-star wide receiver out of Maryland, McDonough High School. Pipeline continues, right? The countless prospects, PJ Mustipher, Devon Elise, Denai Dennis Sutton, right? All these prospects that continue to join Penn State from McDonough High School. Exiner complements what Penn State is trying to do with its wide receiver recruiting. A lot of other speedy targets, but you have Exiner, who's pretty balanced there and adds that larger frame. And then how about Dion Barnes? 3 edge commits in 1 week, back-to-back days. And Jayden Woods is the most recent. He's the latest top 10 player out of the state of Kansas. And Woods obviously has all of the skills that you would want in a defensive end edge recruit. But Woods is an instinctive player. You turn on the tape, 8 pass deflections as a pass rusher in 2023, in addition to 71 tackles, 10 tackles for a loss in that same season. But 8 pass deflections. That tells me everything I need to know. Somebody that is able to read plays well, and if he isn't going to disrupt it in the backfield, he's still able to get his hands up and still disrupt the play so that it doesn't continue any further. Now, this is going to be more of a discussion point in the future, and it should be now. But defensive end is going to be overhauled after this 2024 season. Expect Abdul Carter, Denai Dennis Sutton, Amin Vanover, Smith Vilbert, all of those guys to move on after this season. So they need to load up now. They absolutely, and that's why they're doing it. That's why they have 3 defensive end edge defender commitments in the class of 2025. They're not stopping with Zahir Mathis. They want to try to get him in the fold as well. Deshaun Burnett could project as a defensive end. So at the end of the day, Penn State might have 5 edge defenders overall in this class of 2025. Dion Barnes did a heck of a job reestablishing the interior of the defensive line in last year's cycle for 2024. Now you have the outside pass rush in 2025. Dion Barnes was the perfect hire, the right hire. It's taken some time because, gotta admit, it was pretty quiet for the defensive line in this cycle. But wow, Dion Barnes has put on a masterclass for recruiting in both of these cycles in 2024 and 2025. He's had a clear-cut objective, and he's gotten it done. He's checked off every single box. Sure, Zahir Mathis is still to be determined, but you have to like and appreciate what Barnes has done in 2 cycles as the full-time defensive line coach. That'll do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. We'll have some more content for you throughout this entire week, more recruiting updates as they happen, reactions, analysis, some other bigger topics to preview Penn State football going into the 2024 season. So keep it right here for all that and more on Locked On Nittany Lions. And as always, thanks so much for checking out this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Be a part of the discussion down in the comments section. What do you think of this class of 2025? Can they finish in the top 10? Which players do you think will definitely commit to the Nittany Lions? I want to know your thoughts down in the comments section. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like, share it with friends and family. It would mean a lot to me. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to keep up with all the latest around your favorite Penn State sports teams. Don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. You can find Locked On Sports Today now available on YouTube and the free Fire TV channels app.